Oi, g'day me grimy claws. It's time for another gooey glut of grisly gaiety. Today's sloppy serving comes all the way from the land down under. That's right folks, it's my first ever OZPLOITATION movie, and boy did I pick a beauty. 1993's Body Horror Banquet, Body Melt. A sickly soiree about a pharmaceutical company using suburban Sheilas and blokes as guinea pigs for their performance-enhancing drugs. So grab a tinny and a sanger from the esky and tuck in while I have a yarn about that sleazadorky. And I'm done doing that terrible accent, by the way. We have 13 dead bodies, 6 cups blood, 20 cups slime, 10 cups snot, 4 naked breasts, 1 naked butt, 1 naked dong, 1 naked scrotum, 1 very well crafted fake dong. Actual porn, I'm pretty sure. Vascular throbbing, detergent chugging, kangaroo gutting, adrenal gland chewing, throat chewing, genital smashing, massage-induced rib removal, placenta expulsion, forced placenta ingestion, exploding womb, face hemorrhaging, throat tentacle hemorrhaging, back hemorrhaging, exploding erection, 1 strangulation, porcelain head bashing, melting and compressing head, gigantic swollen tongue asphyxiation, 1 erectomy, bullet to the palm, bullet to the head, mobile snot, and gigantic cellular phones. And I gotta take off this ridiculous fucking hat. But before our movie begins, we gotta watch some shitty YouTube commercial for shit we're not interested in and never asked for. Oh, wait. This is the movie. Vimaville is a facility promising health and vitality, and there's nothing at all sinister about the spokesperson, Sean. Jump cut to Sean getting all sweaty and gross with some dude on the couch. She preps a hypodermic with Dr. Herbert West's reanimating agent and injects it into his arm. Immediately, his veins start swelling. Sean's on the phone saying that she gave Ryan a going away present and says he won't get too far. Apparently, Ryan's been expressing his sudden conscience in experimenting on unsuspecting Aussies, and that's just not something we can have. Ryan's accessing the super high-tech and futuristic computer to find the files of the guinea pig families. After getting the info, he burns a security card and heads down the road. I'm sure the bubbling photograph won't be any heavy-handed foreshadowing at all, right? Meanwhile, at Holmesville, the neighborhood is getting a jump on the day. Paul opens his mailbox to find free samples from Vimaville. The young Housos, that's Aussie speak for trailer trash, are loading up for a road trip, and Thompson is heading out for his morning jog. Ryan makes it to a servo, that's Aussie speak for gas station, petrol station, and pops a whole bunch of pills. I mean, you know your company is doing unethical things, why would you keep ingesting their products? He goes inside and asks the clerk, where's the detergent? He grabs a bottle and chugs it down. Suddenly his throat starts hemorrhaging and he takes off, catching the attention of the conveniently placed police who take chase. Back at Holmesville, Brian is looking out the window to see where the sirens are coming from and comforting his pregnant wife. That's when Ryan speeds to the end of the cul-de-sac and crashes into a van. He's sent through the windshield and tentacles explode from his throat, but retract before any witnesses can see. Paul is trying his free sample. Oh, dude, never ingest something that came in the mail unsolicited. I don't even trust washing my clown suit in detergent samples. Detective Sam Phillips shows up and suddenly the neighborhood is jumping. Gino and Sal ask if he needs them to stick around as they're anxious to get going on holiday. He asks a few basic questions, but sends them on their way. Phillips finds a mini cassette recorder with Ryan's final words.
The first phase is hallucinogenic. The second phase is glandular. The third phase is... Oh, God!
Paul makes his way to the airport and looks like he's already been flying for a while. He glances at the sun-baked lady on the side, and she goes supernova, but he snaps out of it when his monster cell phone rings. Whoever's on the other side apparently cancels whatever his reason for traveling was, and Paul is not happy about it. Gino and Sal are out in Whoop Whoop. That's Aussie speak for middle of nowhere. That's when we see a photograph of Gino with Sean, and that the two are heading up to Vimaville to donate sperm. Paul's at the airport cafe sitting across from a lady who looks as though she's had a rough life. She says she needs a place to stay. Then the camera gives us a wide shot showing Paul isn't talking to anybody. The boys stop off for directions, and that's when we're introduced to a delightful character by the name of Pud. We also see that the boy's windshield is busted, but there's no explanation why. I actually went back to see if it was damaged in the earlier crash at the neighborhood, but it's perfectly fine until this very moment. Pud offers to fix the windshield and then screeches out a call that brings out a pair of genetically questionable individuals named Bab and Bronto. Seriously, I don't know how big of a red flag you need, but this is one of the biggest get the fuck out of here moments I think I've ever seen in a horror movie. Then out comes another named Slab who takes their order and gives it to Mac, who's called the Brainy One. Paul's sleeping on a couch in a radio station office, and he's woken up by a cute secretary who offers to cover for him if he wants to take off for the day. He makes it back home to see the police still working the wreck from the morning. He goes inside and sees the phantom girl from the airport. She says the place looks like shit, but he says it's all he could afford after his divorce. He tells her where the spare bedroom and shower are at, and then she disappears. He goes to his bedroom and is approached by a different woman who jabs him in the belly, and he wakes up. Slab's flirting with the boys when Gino goes to check on the windshield. Pud asks where he's from and laughs when he finds out it's Holmesville. Sal calls Gino away, and they chase after the others, who spotted a kangaroo. Bab grunts a call and chucks a rock that drops through. They run up to it and cut open its neck to snack on the critter's adrenal gland. Now that the boys are all hopped up, they jump in their ute, that's Aussie speak for truck, and whip some donuts. And Sal decides to go chat with Slab, who takes him over to the garage. The detectives are finally done at Holmesville and are looking over the evidence, including a pill bottle from Vimaville. Back at the farm, Gino is apparently really impressed with the boys' ability to drive in a circle, and Sal is getting busy in the barn. Bab invites Gino into the house, and it's just more red flags that go unnoticed. Gino sees an old photograph of Pud in a lab coat, but before he can ask too many questions, someone screams. And of course, it's Sal. His neck is bleeding, and apparently Slab's remedy is to smash his genitals with a pipe and keep chewing. Gino keeps nosing around and finds a TV playing what I'm certain is actual porn, and accidentally sits on another gross family member he didn't see before. Startled, he takes off running. Slab comes out of the barn, blood running down her chin. Pud approaches her, gives her a left hook, and screams,
How many times do I have to tell you? Keep it in the family!
He orders them to find the other one, and they jump to it. Gino runs for the ute, but is distressed to find out the steering wheel doesn't work.
You're going nowhere in that truck.
The detectives make it to Vimaville and meet with Sean. They show her a picture of Ryan, but she says she doesn't know who it is. Phillips then shows her the Vimaville bottle, and she says they're marketing new products, and the victim must have purchased them. She then takes them on a tour of the facilities, and they leave, satisfied that they've done all they can with the lead. Time to visit the coroner, who's been studying Ryan's body. He says his stomach wall has been eaten by something corrosive, then shows off the autopsied corpse. He points out the address written on his arm, 9 Pebbles Court, and they recognize it as Paul's house. The coroner then says the toxicology says his body was unnaturally healthy, full of brand new cognition enhancers. Back at Paul's house, he's taking another glass of the free sample and has a flashback of the 2 phantom women. He finds himself on the bed being massaged by the previous woman, who's saying,
You are the last one. I have collected 12 others.
He looks over and sees a display of 12 rib bones. She massages harder and harder until one of his ribs begins to exit through his flesh. She takes it in her hand and holds it up triumphantly as the blood flows down her arm and Paul passes out. At the Noble house, Angelica finds a package from Vimaville as Thompson is heading out for a jog. And if we didn't have enough characters in play already, we remind everyone that there's a young couple with their first child on the way. Brian heads off for work while Cheryl stays at home. She notices the detectives checking on Paul and asks her some questions about him, but Cheryl says they just moved in and haven't met anyone yet. Phillips leaves his card and congratulates her on the pregnancy. Cheryl's at Dr. Carrera's for a regular checkup, and he says the baby's doing fine and he'll see her in a week. Carrera makes a call and, surprise, surprise, it's Sean on the other line. He says they'll have to decrease Cheryl's dosage. Sean says that will invalidate the results, but he says they don't have a choice. He also adds they're going to have to change their strategies thanks to Ryan's crash. Sean asks how she was supposed to know he could handle that dose, and Carrera says the drug's unpredictability is exactly the problem. Sean says they have an exclusive deal with chain stores in place, and delaying now would jeopardize that plan. He then asks if the Italian kids have shown up, and she says they haven't. Carrera says if they fail, it will be worse than thalidomide, and Sean hangs up on him. Sean screams out for Beauville, her muscle-bound corporate lackey.
We're shipping the tablets this evening.
But that's way ahead of schedule.
He reminds her that Carrera is in charge of distribution, but she says they're changing strategies, and he heads over to the warehouse to get started. Back in Carrera's office, the phone rings, and he answers it by saying to not hang up on him ever again, assuming it's Sean. Unfortunately, it's Pud, looking over the photograph of Gino and Sean. He tells the doc he knows where to find him and hangs up. Cheryl's home unpacking and getting the house set up when Paul's foamy face pops up in the window. That night she goes to the bathroom for some water and feels off, so she puts on the stethoscope to listen to the baby. Next morning, the Noble family is packed up in the car and introduce themselves to Cheryl. They tell her they're going on a holiday they'll never forget. Back inside, a sudden pain causes Cheryl to drop her coffee cup and fall to her knees. Breathing raggedly, she stands up and clasps her hand over her mouth when she notices her placenta on the floor. The phone rings and it's Dr. Carrera. She asks if dropping the placenta 1 month before birth is possible, but he says it's not and agrees to come over right away. That's when Cheryl notices the placenta is no longer on the floor where it fell. Carrera calls Brian and asks him to meet him at the house, but swears nothing's wrong. Unfortunately, that's a lie. Cheryl is thrashing around the bedroom as if something else is controlling her body. Writhing in agony, she reaches for a conveniently placed knife on the nightstand and raises it above her belly. Brian screams at her from the doorway and the placenta flies out and latches onto his face. It eventually begins to enter his mouth as Cheryl literally explodes. We then get a close-up of her overactive womb and the placenta forcing its way down Brian's throat. Carrera's on the scene as Phillips watches the bodies being loaded up. He asks if the doctor has any other patients in the neighborhood, but he says he doesn't. Phillips then asks if he knows of a viral disease that shows the symptoms that Ryan described on his recording, and the doc plays it cool, but doesn't like hearing about Cheryl's scheduled autopsy. He then looks outside to see Brian very much alive and being driven away by the police. He notices a curtain move at Paul's house and sneaks over with an undescript syringe. Paul turns around and we see his face is peeling away at the mouth and his eyes bulging out. He grabs Carrera by the throat and reaches for his ear, but Carrera gets him with the needle. The Noble family finally arrives at their vacation destination, Vimaville. Inside they find a nice lunch spread and meet up with Demetra, their personal assistant during their stay. She tells them the food has the same nutritional value as their medicines, and they all love the idea. Thompson gets a runny nose and excuses himself to the bathroom, where he has a sneezing fit complete with roaming snot. Out in the gym, Brandon is being the bratty little brother and complains about how much this place sucks. He argues with Eloise, who says,
Hope you break your neck.
when he heads out to rollerblade on the half-pipe. We get some sweet X Games action until he goes for the big one and lands on his head. Nighttime sees the family going to bed, but no one seems too worried about Brandon not being in the room. Thompson says he saw Brandon smuggle his tent in with his luggage and just assumes he's camping out tonight. Unfortunately, Brandon smashed his face in and dies a really awful, painfully slow death. See? Back at Homeville, Phillips, who must be tired of coming to this damn neighborhood by now, is shown Paul's corpse. He takes a closer look and notices Paul has a severed ear in his hand, as well as a vial with Dr. Carrera's name on it. Immediately, we jump to Carrera trying to make a phone call with a missing ear. He angrily chucks the phone out the window and screams down the highway. The beefy meatheads are working overtime to pack up the shipments, and Beauville asks for an advancement on his vitamins, but Sean says no. She brings up the home court files to take a look at the Noble family's urine analysis and leaves a message on Carrera's answering machine. But, uh-oh, Phillips just happened to be standing right next to the phone when she called and heard Sean talking about pushing more tests. Then the results come through the fax machine, and Phillips calls in a chopper. Beauville sneaks into Sean's storage and swipes a bottle of pills. We then check in with a second meathead, Bowman, who's spending his spare time with Demetra. She leaves to go have some brekkie, that's Aussie speak for breakfast, and Bowman turns on some porn. And again, I'm pretty sure what they're showing on TV is actual porn. Suddenly, Bowman gets a circus tent in his boxers that grows out of control and explodes! Pud's having a little gaming time with some shitty dollar store Tiger Electric knockoffs when he hears Carrera approach. That's when we learn he's got enhanced hearing thanks to the doctor's drugs. Pud reminds the doc that at least he had the balls to experiment on himself. Carrera says Pud knows what he wants, and he presents a red vial. He asks what it is, and Pud says it's the missing additive to the drugs. Without it, people die in explosive ways. Carrera takes off to try and fix everything, while Pud and his boys scream some deep purple lyrics.
I love it! I need it! Yeah! And drop power machine! Oh, my whole thing! Stop!
Back at Vimaville, Thompson is in the bathroom and notices his nose is snotting up again. But before he can react, he's blowing mucus all over the mirror. Beauville takes his earlier than prescribed dosage before climbing on top of Demetra. I guess she found her breakfast, huh? His back begins to hemorrhage and split apart, and he accidentally crushes her throat. Sean takes her own dosage, and her vision becomes blurry. Thompson's blasting nose goo all over the bathroom, slips in it, and smashes his head against the bathtub. Lying on the floor, his mucus oozes thick and heavy until he's more snot than human at this point. Angelica comes in to check on him and screams when she sees what's happened. She runs to get Eloise, who hightails it to the front desk to tell Sean something's wrong, but she's in no position to help as she's pretty gloppy herself. Eloise slaps her, gross, and her head implodes. Angelica and Eloise get in the car and take off. Anyone curious where Brandon's at before you take off? They drive to the nearest doctor's office and demand assistance. The doctor comes out to see what's going on, and Eloise says there's an emergency at Vimaville. He's shocked to hear that name, as it was shut down by the Health Commission 20 years ago. Suddenly, Eloise realizes it's the food that did it to them. Just then, Angelica's tongue swells and begins growing out of her mouth until it crushes her throat from the inside. Carrera finally makes it to the facility to find a gooey puddle that once was Sean. He pokes at it with his gun, and Phillips gets the drop on him. But Carrera isn't planning on going quietly. He puts a bullet through his own hand to demonstrate what the right pharmaceuticals can do, but then puts one through his skull. The factory is shut down, and the facility is swarming with officers. Bodies are hauled away, and evidence is tagged. Phillips is heading back to the station, but dispatch radios him to tell him there was an incident at said station. When he gets there, people and walls are covered in green sludge, and an officer explains someone's been throwing up for the past 20 minutes. They got him caught in Philip's office, but there's an officer trapped in there with him. Turns out Brian is finally having a reaction to the placenta he ingested and is about to pop. He's projectile vomiting and his head starts expanding until he drops to the floor. In comes the coroner, who doesn't seem to be bothered at all by the mess, but he comments that the one officer is looking queasy and suggests aspirin. They stop off at the same servo where Ryan got his detergent, and the camera makes a quick pan towards the back to show the newly delivered Vimaville vitamin tablets. I guess they didn't get the production halted soon enough, huh? Jesus Christ, Australia! What the fuck? I really enjoyed this one a lot. To me, this is the kind of dark comedy I appreciate. Gonzo special effects and a script that doesn't take itself too seriously, but still has the basic framework for a narrative to have a flow. Sure, plenty in this one doesn't make a bit of fucking sense, but when everyone is exploding and liquefying, who really cares? Another thing I like about this one, it really didn't puss out too much. Case in point, not only did they kill off a kid, but a pregnant woman and her baby too. And I like a movie that's helmed by a director who's not afraid of pushing past those safety zones that too much of the industry insists be left. I mean, when you watch a kid die a gruesome death and a fetus literally explode from inside the womb, you start feeling pretty damn unsafe in your living room. At that point, what won't this movie do? And that's horror, if you ask me. Body Melt originally was planned to be an anthology movie, but apparently they couldn't get the financing in order for that kind of project. But it still has a bit of an anthology feel to it, in which each household has its own story, with Vimaville acting as the wraparound. Now, as you know, this is the part of the episode where I list the other credits of the cast and crew, but this is an Australian production, and even though most of the cast have a decent list of credits, I don't really know any of them. However, Pud is someone that I bet everyone has seen before. He was played by Vincent Gill, and he had a small role in a tiny little low-budget 70s flick known as Mad Max. Oh yeah, it's none other than the Knight Rider, baby. So with that sleazy, slimy, succulent serenade in the books, it's time to say goodbye for now. And until our paths cross once again, this is your crusty, clowny crony, Sugar Pants. See you in your dreams.
Just what the doctor ordered.